Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, is facing another round of public backlash, and for the same old reason. Just weeks after Rachel Ziegler's controversial comments that offended millions of Americans, Disney dropped the second trailer for Snow White, and it's not going well. The internet is absolutely determined to make this remake a flop. In fact, as of December 10th, the trailer has only managed to rack up 20,000 likes and a whopping 800,000 dislikes. Do the math. That's a staggering 14 downvotes for every single like. And believe it or not, the dislikes are climbing fast, so much so that 1 million dislikes for this trailer could be just days away. Now, I'm not trying to be mean, but let's face it, these numbers don't lie. Disney live-action remakes have a mixed track record, to say the least. People weren't exactly thrilled with Dumbo or The Lion King either. But what's got Snow White in the hot seat? What's making it stand out as public enemy number one? The answer is a mix of frustration, nostalgia, and Disney's relentless push to update these beloved classics, whether anyone asked for it or not. Sure, the trailer looks rough, nothing special really. But what's really fueling this backlash isn't just the poor visuals. Oh no, it's the bold creative choices, combined with years of Disney attempting to modernize these iconic films at the expense of what made them so magical in the first place. Let's start with the biggest question. Who actually wanted a Snow White remake? Honestly, not many. Sure, the original 1937 version is an iconic masterpiece, groundbreaking as the first ever full-length animated film, but remakes weren't exactly high on anyone's wish list. Yet, here we are. It's starting to feel like Disney's more interested in squeezing every last drop out of its legacy than in listening to what the audience actually wants. The original film still holds up today. Its stunning animation and historical significance are timeless. So why mess with it? But instead of leaving the classic untouched, we're stuck with a remake that nobody really asked for, with unnecessary changes designed to fix problems that no one even saw. The real controversy, though, lies in the behind-the-scenes decisions. How? They've handled Snow White's character and the film's direction. This Snow White remake didn't just stumble into public disapproval, it sprinted right into it. And the issues go far beyond a bad trailer or lackluster CGI. What's happening here taps into a much larger cultural battle. There's a war playing out in Hollywood right now, and Snow White is right in the middle of it. So what does this tell us? What does this reveal about the current state of the industry? Chris, it tells us about the cultural significance of pissing everyone off. Everyone, not just our corner of the internet. That's why we're talking about Snow White in the first place. Here's the deal. Disney is caught between two conflicting worlds. On one side, you've got the age of IPs where studios are too scared to create anything new and instead rely on recycling old stories, hoping that nostalgia will be enough to bring in the crowds. On the other side, you've got the fallout from a period where Disney and other studios pushed too hard, way too hard, trying to inject progressivism or wokeism into their narratives. These two priorities are clashing in a big way, and Snow White is taking the brunt of that collision. Let's dive into some of the specific changes that have fans absolutely fuming. First up, the dwarves, or more accurately, the complete absence of dwarves. Instead of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, we've now got Snow White and the 7 magical persons. Why? Well, actor Peter Dinklage called out the original story for being offensive to little people. And sure, there's merit to that. But the solution? Magical beings. Magical beings. This idea was universally mocked because, let's be real, it's ridiculous. And then there's the whole strong female character movement. Back in the 2010s, studios were obsessed with making every female character strong, and they pushed it so hard it became a parody. Now people are burnt out on it, and when you overdo anything, people eventually crave the opposite. That's why audiences are pushing back. And then there's Rachel Ziegler's casting as Snow White. Disney should have remembered that Snow White isn't just a name, it's a literal description. Her skin is white as snow in the original story. Casting someone who doesn't match this defining trait feels like a massive misstep, like they fundamentally misunderstood the character. Sure, race bending can work in some cases, like with The Little Mermaid, where Halle Bailey crushed it as Ariel. But with Snow White, it's right there in the name. It's hard to ignore that. The worst part? A lot of these changes feel condescending. Disney seems obsessed with fixing its classics to fit modern sensibilities. But in doing so, they've forgotten the core of what made these stories beloved in the first place. These aren't just stories, they're cultural touchstones. And when you mess with that, people notice Disney's recent attempts to update its classics aren't just missing the mark, they're completely missing the point. From changing lyrics in The Little Mermaid to removing iconic scenes in other remakes, these updates don't enhance the originals, they make them feel preachy. It's like Disney thinks it knows better than its audience. Take Snow White, for example. Sure, the original isn't perfect by today's standards, but it's a product of its time, and fans adore it because it has a timeless charm. Reworking it to fit modern ideals doesn't just erase that magic, it alienates the very audience Disney needs to win over. And this whole Snow White debacle is a wake-up call for Disney, which has spent years banking on its classics for short-term gains. But with every misstep, it's becoming crystal clear. This strategy has limits. You can only alienate your core audience so many times before they stop showing up altogether. Disrespecting the fans who made Snow White legendary, disrespecting the film that helped build Disney, and disrespecting half of the country, it's a recipe for disaster. The whole all press is good press thing, it doesn't work here. Then let's talk about the prince, or more accurately, the lack of him. Early reports suggested that Snow White wouldn't be pining for a prince and that he wouldn't even play a role in saving her. Fine, sure, no one's asking for a damsel in distress narrative in 2024. But here's the catch. Snow White wasn't about waiting for a man to swoop in and save her. The prince was a symbol of hope, not the central focus of her journey. Disney's misunderstanding of this original story is what's got so many fans frustrated. Snow White wasn't some lovelorn girl obsessing over romance. Her story was about resilience, kindness, and staying true to herself in the face of adversity. By removing the prince entirely and framing it as a feminist reboot, it feels like Disney is trying too hard to fix something that wasn't broken in the first place. And then there's Rachel Zegler. Oh boy. If Disney's creative decisions weren't enough to stir the pot, Zegler's interviews did the rest. In one particularly infamous moment, she dismissed the original Snow White as outdated, implying that this remake was correcting all the things that were wrong with it. Newsflash: many Disney fans actually wanted the love story. There's a demand for that, but this remake is missing the mark. Snow White has become a symbol of how out of touch Hollywood is, showing that studios aren't actually giving people what they want anymore. They're too busy trying to fix things that weren't broken in the first place. Let's talk about Zegler's tone for a second. The way she approached the situation didn't sit well with fans, to say the least. Instead of celebrating Snow White's legacy, her comments came off as dismissive, dare I say, elite, and that's the issue right there. People don't want to feel like they're being talked down to, especially about something as beloved as Snow White. Zegler's remarks about Snow White not needing to be saved by the prince only added fuel to the fire. To many, it sounded like she was projecting modern sensibilities onto a story that was never about romance to begin with. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, snarky, condescending, and frankly, out of touch with the audience. Disney's trying to court